Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 486 of the Constructive Criticism Podcast. I'm your host, Heezy, and I'm joined by the coach with the most riz and the coach with the most biz. What's up, Abe, Mason, and Abe?
Dibs on Riz?
Well, as the Rizzler, I'll let you have it because I don't need the. I don't need.
Well,
the
you
title.
definitely have more biz.
That's true. But
I was going to let you guys find it out. Like, I knew that this would be a conversation when I said it, but I was, some days I'm a really good host, and I like think about the intro beforehand. And I was like, this one's funny. This will get the reaction.
Yeah.
I do like those blue light glasses, though, Mason.
Yeah. What's up?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Abe.
These are not the ones you got me.
Oh, well,
These broke a long time ago.
You
right,
broke my
these
glasses I got you?
They were too small for my head. I got these.
Special announcement. Mason's last episode this week. Didn't use Spencer's glasses. That might be the last we hear from him.
Well, I'm sorry that they broke. I tried to buy you some nice.
No,
stuff
you're good. It was nice. They just were too small for my head was the problem. But I used them a lot, and so they broke.
All right, well, let's talk about the main point of the show. It is always improving. I don't have like a cool segue here. I just learned that I bought Mason something too small for his head. That's an always improving moment on my part. I'll go first. I decided not to play Magic for the most part this week. I thought about playing draft and stuff. I have quite a few teammates qualified for Atlanta. So, the most of the Magic that I played was kind of thinking about different decks, whether it be, like Gruul or Monogram without Karn. So I did try a lot of different Gruul lists, imagining what those lists would look like with Smuggler's Copter, things like that, as I was quite confident that would be a change that might be coming to Pioneer. But outside of that, I actually just kind of took a step back. Like I had a rough mental health week, and I think sometimes when you're in a spot where I've had a rough year in Magic, and I've only been to one RC in the last year. A lot of that has been me just straight up skipping RCQs. Just like, I don't have time. I don't have the mental bandwidth to go to these events. And specifically for Atlanta, I got 2 second place finishes in a row, where I in the finals of one of them literally called my wife and was like, hey, do I want to go to this event in December of this time frame? Like, how will that impact our family? Like, how will that look? Kind of stuff. And it's been nice to be able to kind of be more of a fly on the wall, or like a bird, or I don't know, just give my input to people. I had some teammates messaging me today like, okay, what does Copter mean for elf decks? What does Copter mean for other decks and stuff like that? So kind of just taking a step back in Magic has been really cool for me this week. And it's not something that I always do because of this podcast, where like I try to be more involved than maybe I need to be considering where my life is at. But it was really nice for me this week.
That's great. I mean, not to like jump the order, but mine was kind of similar, and I'll get into that later. But yeah, I think it's really important to like take steps back, especially when like we kind of have ended up being a little lame duck week where not much can really happen. Finding the moments where you can fit it in when we do have so many more commitments in regards to Magic is, I think, very important. And so I'm happy to be able to find that time, and I think it is very important to like step back.
Yeah, I had a number of friends who are qualified for Atlanta, and qualified for Atlanta too. And I'm going to go and I'm going to play, but already having the PT invite for Chicago means the event is like a lot less stressful for me, and a lot. I'm going to play because I want to, and it's going to be enjoyable, and I want to do well. But the same kind of pressure isn't on me as it will be, because I'm still looking forward to the Pro Tour in the same format, so it's in line for me to still be preparing for this event. But I had a lot of my friends ask me kind of like, well, how should I best use my time now that we kind of know we're in limbo? And the answer I gave and give a lot is like, you're not going to have many times where the most productive thing you can do is just kind of think and plan and kind of take a step back and give yourself room to breathe, especially with 2 weeks or so away from the event, do it. And so I'm glad that's something you've been able to enjoy for yourself, Spencer.
Yeah, I like to put a lot of pressure on myself, like when my friends are qualified, and I think that if you've listened to this podcast for a decade, you know, like the amount that of Pro Tour testing that I put in for when my friends were qualified for the Pro Tour, hosting, 15 people at my house, type of stuff. Like I'm the type of person that puts a lot into it, and so this week with some of my best friends being qualified, it was for the RC. It was like, okay, well, what can we do? And to me, I said, let's do nothing. If you want to play standard, play standard. If you think your deck's not impacted and you can get reps on your deck, let's do that. I know that one of the players is a pretty big lover of the meme deck right now. It's not actually a meme deck, but it is the meme of Magic in the form of Blue White Lotus. And I think that one of the really cool things that happened this week that maybe we took for granted as a Magic community, because as for me, and I think Mason, you'll probably speak to this too, I had people reschedule multiple coaching sessions this week where it was like, oh, well, I now want to reschedule until after the bans so that we can discuss this, and that can be a part of the equation and things like that. And that's fine, but I also think that it could have been a moment where you focused on an internal skill, a thing that you don't always have the time to focus on. What about you, Abe?
Yeah, so I mean, from the sounds of it, from Mason kind of teasing his always improving, I was kind of in the opposite direction. I used the opportunity of knowing that not a lot of the targeted things I was going to be working on as far as Pioneer were going to be super useful. With the unban especially making it difficult, right? They kind of said, read between the lines, Appraiser and Karn gone. But outside of that, how impactful the unban was going to be, what were they going to unban? That was kind of up in the air. And I used it as an opportunity to get to try out some of the more powerful ideas that we talked about during the set review. Namely Splinter Fin, the Merfolk deck that has Heroes Followers and the enchantment from I forgot the name of the enchantment.
Deep Root Pilgrimage.
Hmm?
Deep Root Pilgrimage.
Yeah, so the Merfolk deck with Deep Root Pilgrimage and Heroes Followers is kind of like a hybrid aggro deck with a combo finish and some collect companies and stuff in there. As well as look into decks using the Red God from new set, that alongside some sack variants with Mayhem Devil and Onicult Anvil, kind of like what we see in standard in the black red decks, but to a bigger extent. Just to kind of explore how those feel and how different they are, or are they better than the lists out there right now, or what are the strengths of that? Because, like I said, with the Pro Tour on the horizon, that information is going to be more useful for me, come 2 months from now when I'm really, trying to lock in, than anything else is going to be compared to anything for the upcoming RC. So, I'm really trying to continue to establish breadth and leave no stone unturned. And so I was able to use this time as kind of a fun little foray into playing things that were not necessarily the most useful. Things that probably, it would take a lot for me to decide, okay, I'm going to play Merfolk the RC kind of on a whim when it's this brand new thing. But if it showed promise, putting that on my list of things to work on more intently for the Pro Tour was definitely in my radar. So yeah, that's how I spent the last week or so.
I love it. I know that people on my testing team have actually been trying Merfolk before the bans, as the deck just got so much in such a short amount of time. So
yeah, what a Spirits and Humans had a baby.
Yeah, it's cool to get to try a deck that it has all the same problems of the other decks that are in that vein, but might have a lot more have an ability to win the game instantly. It has like maybe one of the best cards in the format. I every time somebody counters like flashes in what's the void one and just like counters a non-creature, I'm like, why does it do it like that? Like,
oh yeah, the hex color with
yeah, it's unbelievable.
especially if you have things going with like Kumena and the enchantment, like it just becomes really, really difficult for your
You
opponent
just
to keep.
can't
I am
resolve
finding
spells.
if you're interested in playing the fish deck, I will say you need to build a sideboard plan that has a way to beat Ledger Shredder. Like that creature is just gets very big very quickly, and I think Smuggler's Copter is also going to be a big problem for the decks. It does not do well at punching through medium-sized creatures coming down early, and I think there's just going to be more of that. But overall, it was definitely like just good to feel like I'd put in the time and I know how I feel about it. I think that's something that a lot of times I wish I was able to give more time to, and actually having the opportunity of time to it this week was really nice.
Mason, for the people watching the early access, you got D's what?
I was just I basically took the time this week to kind of do like a mixture of what y'all talked about, where differently didn't just play any or whatever. Was just like, hey, like this is I don't know what's gonna happen. The unban informs things a lot to the point that like I'm not gonna really play anything because I have kind of did what Abe's talked about a little bit earlier, you know what I mean? So I've been kind of getting that ball rolling. So I felt like I'd done that homework. So I spent a lot of time doing two things what I would normally practicing. One was just like while I'm at the gym, like, you know, having my deck building app out on my phone and building random decks. You know, I think I showed one to Abe because I know Spencer hates the Raven Inspector, but like blue white flash, you know, like I built that the other day and like now Copter's back, Abe, we can do it. But you know, it's like you know, the bigger problems is the rest of the cards. But like working on that kind of stuff where it's like, okay, what does that look like? All right, what does green look like? Okay, what does Gruul look like? Okay, like if they unban Nexus, what does that look like? Okay, if they unban Leyline, if they unban Copter, kind of like going through a bunch of things like, okay, what cards get better if Copper gets unbanned? Like NT, I believe is how you say its name. Like those sort of cards, like, okay, what can we do? And then just relaxing, you know? So it's like, hey, I'm still putting some time forward. I'm thinking about a lot of theoreticals, kind of getting I described it to one person as like, I got a bunch of things like on the stove and like preheating. And when Monday comes, I'm going to like get in there and do it. And the other thing was I kind of told myself like, hey, you're going to take the next couple of days off for the most part. And like, you know, yesterday I just like barely did anything. I like, you know, played some games with some friends. I watched The Righteous Gemstones. I just did nothing. And it was like, okay, because tomorrow through Wednesday, you're going to play like nonstop Magic. So you can start thinking about stuff again on Thursday. You know, and that is like what I've been doing. I've coached all day today and played Magic every chance I could between it. And then after this, I'm going to jam Magic till I go to bed. So like, you know, I think my recruiting moment was sort of trying to use my time efficiently while also trying to basically take a break without completely giving up the time, if that makes sense. So, which is hard. I think it's hard to oscillate personally between those two things.
It's so funny because it's actually kind of hard to take a break from Magic. Like I said that I did it this week, and then I mentioned like, you know, I probably put in like 20 plus games with like Rule and Pioneer, right? Mm-hmm. But like to me, if I'm gonna do like quests on Arena or whatever, or I'm gonna like do something like I might naturally just play those games in my downtime, right? And I think that one thing that I actually really loved a comment, and I think maybe we might disagree on this, Abe, but like we loved a comment from Mikey, one of our patrons, where he was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna just do my daily quest and go to bed." I was like, "Well, that's like a good way if you're like breaking your like normal routine to take a break from Magic while continuing to play Magic." If you're like, okay, I need to go like draft to get these quests done, or I need to go play a deck I wouldn't normally play, or things like that, that's a good way to like break out of your zone or like your current thing. And I don't know, Mason, I just appreciate that you are honest about like you don't play that much Magic, right? So like you being like, I don't know, like I played like however much you played, and that's your break with like thinking about Magic more.
I played zero Magic this week.
Oh, you played zero Magic. Okay.
I played zero Magic this week, but I thought about stuff a lot. But like, yeah. I guess that's technically not true. I was in a league when the stream happened, I finished that league up. I had one more match, and then I was just done. I had to finish it so I could turn my cards, and I was just like, all right, I'm just gonna think about stuff.
I love
Just
that. I do think that my point still stands of like,
Yeah.
it's really easy to like, we love this game, and I think all of us have probably had times where we played way more Magic than we needed to play, and that the Magic we played later was probably detrimental. That is going to do it for Always Improving. One of the ways that you can participate in Always Improving, and over the Patreon, go to patreon.com/HousekeepingGG. We have an Always Improving channel where you can post your Always Improving moments. People can talk about them with you. We don't give shout outs to our newest patrons. We have Andy and Dylan. Thank you so much. Both patrons, part of the platinum level supporter. That means they get access to the Discord. They're in there. They're participating, and it means the world when we get this guy. Those types of stuff. I mean, everyone means a lot. I know that Patreon recently gives you free subscriptions where you're still showing that you love the show. You're still showing that you're interested, but it's always really cool to get those, and we always shout out those new people. Really quick housekeeping. Shout out to our new sponsor, Untapped.GG. If you're an arena player and you don't use this, you're probably spewing like interesting value. Have you used this, Abe? I actually don't know. I know that Mason.
I used to use Untapped on my old computer, but I haven't re-downloaded it because I don't play as much arena anymore.
Sure. Yeah. It is one of the things that like it is really helpful just as a tool when whether you're drafting or whatever. You can visualize your outs is what I like to say to people, and like why I recommend the software just in general. So there's a link in the show notes where if you download it, we get a kickback, and I highly recommend the software. We really appreciate it. It's really cool. The second that I asked them about the sponsorship, they said yes. It wasn't even like a conversation. It was, hey, we love your product, and they were like, hey, let's do it. So
the software is also free to use, correct?
Yeah, and we even get the kickback on the free. Like, you don't even have to get the premium for them to support us. That's a really good point, Mason. Just creating your account.
Download
it. Yeah, no, Mason's absolutely right. You don't need to use the premium version for us to get the kickback. If you've never tried the software, if you just download it and create the account, we get that kickback. But for what it's worth, like if you're a drafter and you're listening to this, it is worth it. It's like having like the most premium draft version of Arena possible, and also like they track your stats really well. Like they give you additional stuff for contracted players. Check it out. The free version give you that kickback. I love Mason. You're always promoting mentality. I should have said that. I don't know. I'm bad at this. Like I'm like, hey, this thing is great. Use it. But the truth is like it's free for you, and it really does help the podcast out. So check it out.
Yeah, that's my sort of thing. It's just like it's free. Give it a shot. If you hate it, that's fine. No one says you have to use it forever. Just give it a shot. Click the code, and if you don't like it, that's on us. Yell at Abe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just play 2 hours of Raid Shadow Legends, and then once you're done.
We actually only have the sponsorship for the arena version. We could get it for Snap and other stuff, but it is only the arena version that we have the sponsorship for.
One step at a time, dude.
I will say this too though. Like we got another sponsorship offer from the same thing that we got a while back of like the psychic person like messaged us again. And like I just don't believe in like doing sponsorships of things we don't love. And I legitimately love Untapped GG. Like I use it all the time. It helps me a ton when I'm looking at like, okay, is my mana base correct as I'm playing matches? Like what is happening? Like how is this number moving? What do my outs look like? What do my win conditions look like? It is really helpful for me as a deck builder. So check it out.
I thought you were going to say you love psychics. Now this is going to get into an entirely different kind of podcast conversation.
No, do you not know this backstory about this game?
I do. I was just like, where are you?
Okay.
Because the way you were saying it was like, where is he going with this?
No,
we love psychics now.
If you want to listen to the backstory of this, just listen to the Jerry T podcast when Brian and
yeah, from a year ago. Go find it.
Is it that old?
Yeah, it's like
yeah. Yeah, they messaged us 2 weeks ago. They were like, "Hey, nice. In case you forgot." All right, the BNR. What are the announcements that happened? So last week we got on Monday, the time of the recording. We put this in the show notes that Mason and Abe recorded on Monday, and on Tuesday there was a video that was like, "Hey, everything that Mason and Abe said doesn't matter. Congratulations." We posted our podcast on Wednesday, and Abe, I gotta ask, like, I'd love both of you to answer this. How did you guys feel after that? Like, we joke about it all the time, but like, were you sad that you had just done that podcast, or like, how did you feel, Abe?
I mean, I wouldn't say that everything we talked about was completely invalidated. We did talk about decks that weren't ones that were banned, but everything changing so fast, like right after, like recording is just, I don't know, I was glad people still seem receptive to the episode. Yeah,
it did actually really well for what it's worth.
Yeah, but you know, obviously less than ideal. We also knew the band announcement was coming today, right? That was like on the calendar, and it seemed like this was a lot. And we even talked about it during the episode, saying like, who knows if this deck is really going to still be around? But the unban that we're going to get to, that's something I wasn't really that expecting at all. So
yeah, definitely agree. I also think it's just like an improvement on our part of just like we knew the BNR was going to be today, and we just plan our episodes like 2 months in advance or whatever. But we should just plan around that sort of stuff. I mean, it's fine. Like Abe said, there's some stuff that happens. I'd rather it go that way than Wizards not tell everyone. Basically, like, I know a lot of people were mad that like they dropped "this is happening," wink wink, we're banning Appraiser, wink wink. I much prefer this than not telling people. And much people buying Appraiser because it's just so clearly broken for the RC or whatever. Like the deck was just like as time went on, I watched more people play it. It was just like, oh wow, this is like super good. Maybe it's not actually broken, but it's like clearly incredibly strong and puts a lot of pressure, and people would have bought it. And so I much prefer them do that than more people waste money during the holidays. So.
Yeah, I think that, one, I want to just kind of shout out the people that, like, continue to listen to the episode either way. They really care about our opinions about Pioneer, whether or not what we say today is going to change that. And then, two, like, I don't know. I think that announcements are really weird, but I know personally at least one person that it really helped in their financial situation, where they were able to sell cards that would have done some stuff. And personally, I made a joke in our Discord, and I could have bought Smuggler's Copter when I was pretty sure it was going to be unbanned. That would have made me a lot of money. And so, like, the announcement of the announcement, while is a meme at this point, it does have its benefits. So, I'm going to get into the announcement now. We are not going to cover all the changes. We are constructive criticism, and while we used to cover Pauper on the show, we haven't been in a long time. If we do, we'll probably invite a Pauper guest on to like talk about Pauper and get Pauper more involved. Like even though I used to own every Pauper deck in MTGO, do not anymore. Like we'll get a Pauper person to talk about this. Monastery Sphere is banned in that format. I don't have an opinion of that. I don't think that we need to talk about that. We're going to start. Yeah.
I know people on the Pauper committee. I have friends that play it a bunch. It was really good. I'm glad it's banned.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're going to start with Pioneer. So what they said or hinted at was what happened. Karn the Great Creator was banned, and Geological Appraiser is banned. This is the only format that got it unbanned in the form of Smuggler's Copter, which we've hinted at a bunch on the show. And then Modern, Fury is banned, and Up the Beanstalk is banned. So, kind of a round table. We're going to start with Pioneer. Abe, what are your thoughts?
So I really like this ban. I actually didn't think the Karn ban was ever going to happen. I was like way more convinced for a long time that they would just ban the things that allowed Karn to like go infinite mono green. Even though I think the Karn is a really, really oppressive card to have in the format, and just like I spoke to in the announcement post, like it not only makes it so that artifacts see less play on the whole, it also means that strategies that are otherwise cool get hated out like a lot quicker, and it just puts a lot of pressure on the format, especially when a deck playing that card is able to go infinite on its own, or like the mono green deck being able to just generate a ton of resources and win the game by way of just having Karn in their deck going the full distance. Makes it a lot less interesting. That's the inevitability of the format, compared to actually having to find a way to end the game uh, more traditionally. And so that's really good. And the appraiser stuff, we talked about it last week. It's too much. It was very much like the experience of playing Splinter Twin Modern, except the cards are not nearly as efficient at answering what's going on. And also that's way more resilient, because rather than having to have like two kind of bad cards together around a rest of a bunch of good cards, you just had a whole deck full of these combo pieces and you were just casting single things. It was kind of closer to like a Balustrade Spy deck than anything else, and those things have been gone for a long while. So that's kind of my 2 cents on Pioneer. Like the Smuggler's Copter Unban is something I didn't see coming, and I think is going to make the format a lot. It's going to be pretty interesting to see how it pans out. I think it's going to make a lot of decks want to be a lot more aggressive to play this really good card. But I think a lot of decks are not going to be able to effectively be more aggressive, or it's not going to be good for them to be more aggressive, even though the card slots in well. And that's going to take a little bit of time to figure out, again, because so much has changed since Copter was banned initially. But that card is obviously just a mid-range powerhouse. So,
Mason, what are your initial thoughts on the Pioneer bans and unbans?
Yeah, I mean, the appraiser stuff, I don't think I need to really comment on. I think it's all been said. And I feel like the Karn stuff was good. I thought there was maybe a world where, I mean, it's so weird because of how candid Dan was on the live stream. It's just like, oh, it's going to be Karn. You just don't say those words like that unless it's Karn. But there was a long time I was like, well, maybe they'll leave Karn, just get rid of Nykthos. But like, I know they want to be a part of the format, blah, blah, blah. And then there's also a moment of me where it's like, yeah, I mean, the Pro Tour is coming up. Things have been a certain way for a long time. They said that they're looking at doing potential unbans. It doesn't mean they will do an unban now. They seem to be kind of doing a philosophy thing. So I wasn't even sure if there would be an unban. And then I was like, well, maybe they'll ban other things too if they don't do an unban, right? Like, if you just do Karn and Appraiser, I think a lot of players will default to certain decks. So adding something else, I think, is a good thing in this moment to kind of keep things fresh and lively. So I was surprised, and I think Smuggler Copter is a really strong card. I have played some Smuggler Copter Fable decks today, and I was joking with my friend Daniel that just like cards that fall off in the late game no longer exist. You know, like it's like I used to have thoughts like, you know, like I have thoughts, I have elves, and there are games where it's just like, yeah, I can play this elf here, but I kind of want to hold it because I want to discard the Smuggler Copter and just keep rummaging and find my Crone Wars or stuff like that. And I think that like Abe said, it's going to be interesting to see exactly how things play out. I think there are going to be things where people are like, oh, this so good, Copter, put in Rakdos and just like kind of take out Bankbuster. But I don't think I think you need to like build with Copter in mind. And I would say the biggest thing is I expect the format to be a lot faster. I don't remember who it was. Oh, it was I was texting Jerry a little today, and he was saying like, yeah, I feel like 5 drops illegal or whatever, you know? And it was just like, yeah, probably some truth in the gray there. Just like things are a lot faster, and Smuggler's Copter makes it so you're going to get to your cards, do your game plan more consistently, and like there's a real pressure to have early removal. We've talked for a long time about how like there's a lot of pressure to have an answer to turn 1 elf. I think that is like compounded with Copter. Like you need to answer this card early, and you know, Elf Copter. Like one good thing about this unban, I think, is that Elf decks benefit a lot from Copter because they crew the Copter well, and like they give you these fast starts. And I was joking with a friend, like, you've heard of Elf on a Shelf, here's Fable on the table on turn 2, and like that kind of stuff. Like there's a lot of different things that are going to be going on here. So I don't know. I think it's kind of I'm kind of all over the place. Excuse me, but I think there's a lot going on. It is hard to process all the things that are different. And I think that, new strategies are opening up. Like blue, red, and soul is a thing that like couldn't really survive before. And like mono white artifacts, kind of like what Spencer was talking about during the preview of LCI, that can be a thing. Like Metalwork Colossus decks. Like Karn oppressed a lot of strategies, and mono green oppressed a ton of strategies. And there are a bunch of things now that are like, you couldn't really do that with mono green, or was a worse mono green. And now we don't really know, and that's really exciting. So,
yeah, you said obviously a lot of things that I wanted to say about Elf. For what it's worth, I do. Whether it's in our Discord or other places, people like Spencer. This obviously impacts, a deck that you're an expert on a lot, and yeah, I think it's pretty obvious that like 8 Elf decks don't want to draw Elf's late. Copter lets you crew with Elf, discard Elf. That's busted. And in addition to that, like it also means that like the sacking your Elf to like the Huntsman's Saga, whatever that one's called.
Huntsman's Redemption.
Yeah, like the whole thing got a lot better. And I was a big believer a long time ago in Fable in that deck. I had not tried it today. That's not the list I posted in our Discord, but it was my next step. Was like, okay, is Fable like the other truther? Like, do you just have no bad cards in your matchups? Do you just like play 2 roasts in your sideboard for like X5s and like stuff like that and things like that? There are other decks that benefit too, though. Like I know that like green-white company mid-range, for example, this might be a huge get for a deck that like was the vehicle company deck, I think they called it for a while. Like that deck gets a huge benefit here. And honestly, like I am not a believer that mono green is dead as an archetype. It just has to shift. It just doesn't get to be what was a very fun and interesting test for the format now has to change. And maybe there gets to be multiple mono green decks now, right? Like there was no reason to play Stompy Green, right? And now there is a reason to play Stompy Green. But you can probably have mono green Ramp Nykthos and Stompy Green now. They can both be decks now. And that wasn't true. I also think that the best deck, in my opinion, I didn't get to be on the episode last week, in Phoenix, did not get worse with these bans. I actually think that the fact that you need to be able to kill elves, you need to be able to interact on the stack really early, you also need to be able to generate a lot of advantage. And I agree with Jerry T. I wasn't a part of that message, but like 5-drops do be banned. Like you just don't get to do that unless they're in like your ramp, like very specific ramp strategy. So that's kind of my thoughts. Anything else anybody has on my thoughts or on this overall before we move on?
I mean, I'm down to talk a little bit more about Pioneer for which I'm kind of curious what y'all's thoughts are, just because I know a lot of listeners are going to be anxious before the RC, and like, what time is it? It's like, it's been 8 hours since the DNR happened, so like your discretion is advised. But like, I'm down to talk a little bit more if y'all want to, just because I'm sure there's a lot of people anxious going to the RC, and some like early first impression of other stuff would be interesting. Like, for example, I think Mono Green is good. I built like 8 elves, Steel Leaf Champion, Old Growth Troll, Copter, Mono Green, Vivian Arcbow. And that deck seemed pretty good.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure if it was better than the Gruul stuff.
Vivian's totally a dope replacement too, and like we can totally go back to the world where we're like playing Cascading Cataracts or whatever it's called with
for like the ramp one.
With what's the Golos? Yeah,
that'd be the ramp deck, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, you were just talking about Stompy.
That was Vivian Arcbow is the fight one that gives 2+1/+1 counters and trample. You're thinking of Vivian Monsters Advocate, which is the
I'm thinking the green 1/1 that takes creatures out of your sideboard.
Oh, that's Arcbow. Okay, gotcha.
I think that one goes in both decks.
Sure, I believe that. She's just a fight spell too, right? So like she's quite strong. Yeah. I'm curious, like generally, like, just for the listener at home, 'cause I do think there's gotta be something. Yeah.
I'll give you my order of decks that I would try, like, and what I'm proposing to my teammates. I would start with Rule, because like I'm me, and like that's the thing that I think Copter is like a huge get for Rule, for what it's worth. Like I think it was already one of the best elf decks. It already was doing really well at the RCs. One of its worst matchups in the Karn. The Karn version of that deck is actually really bad for that deck. I don't know if like there are more mono green ramp decks that will be bad matchups, but it means that you get to play like less stuff like a Crone War and stuff like that. My next deck though would be Phoenix. I actually don't think that Phoenix got worse. I actually think that in a lot of ways, if you think about like the sack decks that get access to Copter now, because as much as like you made a comment about like the black red mid range deck getting access to Copter, I actually think the sack decks getting access to Copter is way better. And Anvil, as Abe mentioned earlier in the show, that card gets way better when Karn's not in the format. Where like, yeah, so like sack would be my number 3. And that might be the first 3 decks that I test. Abe, what about you?
I think traditional blue-white is actually just like the biggest winner of the whole announcement in terms of positioning. Like I think Temporary Lockdown and Supreme Verdict have gotten like the all-time high levels of good. The biggest issue you're gonna have, I think, for that deck, and still needs to be solved, is finding cards that are efficient answers to specifically a Copter. But I think like the Wandering Emperor can help with that a pretty good bit. And there's other, like, there's ways the deck can shift. You can play like more portable holes, even though it's kind of a non-bow with the lockdowns. I just think that if like the elf, two things. One is that if the elf like creature decks are all turning more fair instead of having more of these like grindy elements, and the format is getting less grindy as a whole, because now one of the best cards in the format is like an efficient any color 3/3 flyer that like loots. It's actually making it so that shorter games are more of what people are trying to play, so you need less to take the game into the stage of the game you want to be in. So I think that blue-white is like pretty good there. I also think that Rest in Peace is a card that's going to be in like a very, very strong position, as like you're saying, Spencer. I think Phoenix still holds on really well. Doesn't really care either way about Copter, as long as it's still playing the 3 damage removal spell shocks, like still playing Torch the Towers, maybe with some ways to enable them better, or definitely playing like the full set of impulses and playing lightning axes. It's in less danger. And then like I think the red black mid range as it is, like I think the best Fable Copter decks are ones that are going to top out at Fable, not ones that are kind of using Fable to bridge. And it's almost like every deck in functionality has access to Fable if it wants it, in terms of like pressure and card selection, like cards that can really snowball a game. The rule is just it has to put things into play. So I think blue-white gets to like be ahead by uniquely being a deck that is able to play some of the best answers to all of the things being incentivized by Smuggler's Copter, is able to play all of the best answers to the things that are going to prey by being one step above Smuggler's Copter, like Rule being a little bit bigger of a deck that's going to like capitalize more, rather than being super low to the ground, and like Copter being more of its like one of its biggest cards. It's going to have Copter as a way to facilitate playing a mix of like stronger creatures itself. That's a deck that blue-white I think is very, very strong against. And like I think the Lotus, like the other thing is that I think all of the Lotus Field decks, any deck putting Lotus Field into it, has gotten substantially worse, because now people's sideboards can get much more condensed, and a lot more decks, especially aggressive decks, can play more copies of the cards they need to interact with you. Like more Damping Spheres can show up. If people are worried about like, you know, Lotus combo and the occasional Quintorius player or whatever.
Why?
Why can they do that? Because they can loot away the excess copies.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
So like playing 3 to 4 Damping Spheres isn't like if you feel like that's a matchup you just need to care about as an aggro deck, you can lights out it with 3 to 4 sideboard slots, whereas before you kind of had to pick. But you're going to see more of your deck and not worry about the redundant copy effect, And also, if your deck has a faster clock now because of Copter, more consistently, like a Burning Tree Emissary Copter deck is just going to like force those decks to speed up in ways they probably can't. So I think there's just a lot of things going on that make a lot of the decks that people were thinking about or thought would be safe to be in worse position, as I think any deck that's being aggressive and proactive got much stronger. And I do think that, like, you know, of the decks that were already very good, Blue White and then probably like Rakdos Sacrifice are the two biggest winners in my mind, because they already have built in the best answers to what people are going to be trying to do. It's just a question of what things will shape up to be over the next week.
I just want to add on that I think that Farewell is a pretty huge winner in this, and that you mentioned Blue White. I think that if you're not one main, one side at the very minimum of Farewell in Pioneer, you're probably doing it wrong. It already shuts down multiple strategies. And I'm going to say this. I think that it's like on the short list of cards that might need to be banned in Pioneer in the future. I think it's actually, I know that's a 6-drop, but like it actually might be too good.
Don't play Commander. It's gonna ruin your life there.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that people already want to ban Commander. I do think that, like, you know, the list that I posted, a rule that didn't even have Fables in it today, of like my starting point, like the reason, like one of the questions we already got is like, Spencer, how'd you land on some of these numbers of these cyber cards? There's 2 Planeswalkers that play alongside Giganta, and the reason that they play alongside, like, is because they don't get hit by Farewell. Like, you actually need something to live through Farewell to play Gruul against Blue White. So,
do you have
also the one other thing I wanted to say? Sorry, that just made me think of it in terms of like playing Giganta, just a big green 5-drop, and also playing through sweepers like that, is that I think that because the format's getting faster, like I think that, and also you're losing a lot of the like mono green things that were forcing exile effects, that even like Farewell and Sunfall become a little bit worse, and like Verdict becomes a little more necessary. And I think that leaves room for like the mono green decks that are Nykthos decks to a form of that to still stay the same, just without a Karn finish, but finding some other way to use, like, I think the Cavalier Nykthos engine is like really, really good. I think that still remains really powerful. I think people are going to not think about it for a while, but Storm the Festival plus Cavalier plus Nykthos plus the triple green cards is really, really good, and I think it's going to be tempting for people to move away from the exile effects for just a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I think the Cavalier Nykthos stuff is good. I think Genesis Hydra is also really good. That's a card that hasn't seen play in a while, but like is something along those similar lines. I saw Spike playing some with it earlier today too. But yeah, so like personally on my 3, sort of lists, I think Convoke is the deck that I am the highest on at the moment. I think it is very strong. Has a low fail rate. Copter helps it a bunch. I'm unsure if I want to play like Copters with Anthalias or like just Thalias on the board. I don't know exactly, but I want to try Copter in that deck. I think that deck is very good, and I don't know, just doesn't seem to be appreciated enough. So that's like
I'm a little surprised, to be honest. I don't think the Copter fits into that deck very well, but I would be interested and happy to be wrong about that.
What do you not like about Copter in the deck? Because I don't think it's like an easy, like, oh baby, we're here, but like I'm pretty happy to put it in personally. So I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so like the thing about so I also am a huge fan of that deck right now. They mentioned like they don't like that people can die before their turn 3, but like this is actually a deck that can do it. My problem with Copter, and the reason that I think that we'll be surprised by Copter in this format, is that you don't have things you want to discard in Boros for the most part. Like okay, so like you draw 1-drop. What are you discarding with your other thing? And maybe it's giving you enough staying power that I'm just wrong, right? Like where it's like, oh no, like it just makes your medium draw so good that it's worth. But
That's
every time
basically
you,
it.
yeah, okay. So like, but every time you draw it, it makes your best draws worse.
Is it worse than Thalia in your best draws?
Yeah,
That's what I'm
100%.
saying. I don't think it's clearly 100% to me. I do think that it is possible that it is true.
Thalia just makes your best draws another 2-drop, right? Whereas this card makes your 2-drop not matter.
I think your best draws don't involve Thalia.
So, okay.
So does that make, like,
then it doesn't matter either way, right?
I agree. So what I'm saying is like the Thalia spot is in the way I've been looking at it is kind of like something to help smooth the games out and like when things aren't super going well. So like what I liked about Thalia in the deck was it was harder for your opponent to interact. The sweepers were worse. You kind of had like a main deck sideboard card, right?
But Thalia contributes to your main game plan where you're like actually convoking.
Yes, Thalia is a body to convoke. Thopter is something you can gleeful, which like I think is not like exactly why I'm playing it, but is something.
That's a good point I hadn't thought of, actually.
And it also like it helps smooth my draw. Like it ups my range of keepable hands because I can like I don't need one thing I like about the Convoke deck is I think a lot of people think it has no staying power, and I think it does because I think it uses its mana pretty well. But like you aren't exactly super excited to get to a lot of lands, so I can discard excess lands. I can move through my 1-drops. Like I don't know, you have like Thraben Inspector and stuff like that like generate extra pieces of cardboard and crew it. So I think it's like pretty reasonable. I think like y'all mentioned a little bit about Dragantha too, but kind of mentioned this part yet of like having something to pick up in your games where you're kind of getting picked apart and then having it be able to loot away is like expensive, but if you're flooding out, you're pretty happy to have that, right? And so Dragantha Copter decks are like yum to me, but to me, for what it's worth, like it is not clear that like Thalia shouldn't just be in my main deck if I were to play at the RC, because if I think people think Convoke is strong, they're going to have sideboard cards and they're going to have a lot of early interaction, and Thalia is better at stopping that. But I think the Copter in Convoke helps my draw come together and allows me to keep more reasonable hands. And so I kind of have something like 2, maybe 3 Copters. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
I do think the medium thing that you're talking about is true. I also just want to call out that like I really like, and I hope that listeners picked up on that Mason is talking about 2 cards that are divergent, where like you don't actually get to play Thalia and Copter, right? Yeah. Because like they actually are at odds with each other, and so Mason does a really good job here of calling that out.
Yeah, like I was talking to someone earlier, and I was like, maybe I could play a Thalia in my main deck, like if I wanted to like split, but like it is going to nombo run into each other, and that is a real problem. There's something to be said about having multiple draws, but I think, you know, in general, it's probably better just to pick one. And I think that you kind of do have to pick a lane. I think the idea of having a split there is a little dubious. But yeah, I think to me, it's just like the deck coming together, and I think is like important. And I think one thing I've really appreciated as I play the deck more and more is just I can sit there and last a while because I have such strong early starts. It forces my opponent to respect them. If I have them actual really strong starts and they don't get broken up, I win. And if the game stalls out a little bit, it's very easy for me to execute a win from there. If I can just get my stuff together. So having Copter that's something that can attack in the air, pick apart my opponent a little bit, make my draw come together, I really appreciate having that in my deck. Even if it's in low numbers, it might be like I said, I'm not wanting 4 Copters. I'm wanting like 2 to 3 Copters, and and like very similar to Thalia is like a 3 of a lot of the time. Like I might play like 2 Copters and like another giant killer, for example. That's like kind of the stuff I'm thinking about. Anyways, that Convoke is high on my list. The green stuff was high, but I think Gruul might be better than green, just kind of straight up. Just having some of those sideboard cards is really important. I think the Akroan War is quite good right now. And I'm just pretty high on that in general. I do think Blue Eye is a big winner, but it wouldn't be on my testing list personally, nor would Phoenix. The only thing with Phoenix, by the way, I think Phoenix is a really, really good deck, and it's probably up there. I'm really anxious about bringing Phoenix to the RC when everyone is kind of like, I don't think it's going to take a lot of thought to figure out Phoenix is a huge winner from this. So a bunch of Goblinks, a bunch of Hearses has me scared. Similarly, I'm also a little worried about Greasefang. But Greasefang I would want to test just because Greasefang got so much recently and hasn't seen a lot of love. So while it's kind of very similar to Phoenix, I think Phoenix is probably better than Fang. I would want to test Fang to make sure that like I was right and it is worse than Phoenix. If that makes sense, listener. So, but both of those decks, like you're walking to the RC, people might have Go Blank Curses. You might be having a bad time.
I know this is kind of weird. Do you guys remember when Greasefang played Elf? Like, way back in the day?
I don't.
Yeah, they were like there was like a little while where like they were playing Elf, and I wonder if like you have like this like real mid range version, right? Where like the way you're discarding, instead of like playing like the mill effects or stuff like that, or you could still probably play some of them, but like where your 1-drops are elves, I don't know, that could be a thing.
I'd be pretty interested in seeing what like there's kind of like the Esper like Greasefang decks with Rafine. I wonder if you can play like an Esper Legends style deck that just has Greasefang and Parhelion and like Sky Sovereign as its top end stuff along with Copters, and then you're able to play like Skrelv, these other things like Protect Yourself while also doing that. And Skrelv and Copter is definitely like a bit of a chocolate peanut butter situation of just 1-drop I want to have at all stages of the game, but maybe not literally all stages, or like I want to cast and have do something that doesn't do anything immediately. But now you can justify holding on to those and using them when you have Copter.
This deck has done things, by the way, before Copter. Like there's been Esper Legends that plays Greasefang, and just I think Rafine is a really strong card, and like we've seen Schooner into Rafine. Copter into Rafine is also very good, I imagine.
Did you see that in Pioneer?
I mean, we've seen it in Standard.
Oh, okay. I was like, I didn't see that. That would have been hot. No. Like that would have been hot tech for me to learn. I do want to say before we wrap up that I was not giving enough props to Oni Colt Anvil as a winner in this for me. Like I actually do think that like decks that care about like random artifacts lying around are huge winners.
Do you want to play O'Hare with it, by the way? Or you just think in general you think that card's a winner?
What card?
O'Hare's the Red God.
Oh, possibly. I didn't want to I didn't want to take away from what Abe said about that.
Sure. Yeah, I was just curious what your thoughts were.
I haven't played it or thought about it, but like somebody on my team texted me about Oni Colt today, and I was like, yeah, I mean, you literally weren't allowed to play this card before. Like, I actually think that some of the sack decks, or if not most of them, didn't even play it.
Yeah, no, it's awful. You wouldn't play it before. Why would you?
Yeah, and now it's like, this seems great, right? Like,
I am a Oni Colt. You have to prove it to me, or like I think the card is strong, but you got to prove it that like it is good without.
It's a bad thing to say on this podcast, man. You're about to be proven wrong.
No, I think it's strong with O'Hare.
Okay, let's talk about Modern. So, I'll go first again. I just want to say what I wish Modern would have happened in Modern before I go into this. If it were up to me, I would have been Beanstalk because I think that they didn't expect Beanstalk to happen the way that Beanstalk happened, and it's just worth like, okay, like this was a limited card. It's not supposed to be in this format. We're just gonna get rid of it. I also would have been Grief and Bowmaster. And I understand that that's 2 black cards, and that's a lot of black cards. But that's what I would have done. So what happened is, we banned Fury and Beanstalk. I think that's reasonable. Fury does a really interesting thing where it hurts creature decks in like a real way, where it's probably unfair how much it hurts creature decks. I don't know that that's gonna fix the format. Like the number of memes that I've seen of people being like, all right, we're a Solitude Grief Ephemery deck, has me actually worried. Like I actually do think that like creature decks are not going to get better from this because of that. Like, I do think that black-white deck does a lot of the same things, except for the deck that I think got a lot of wins out of Yogg in this banning. I am happy that we are taking measures forward, but I am sad that we are ignoring problems that are maybe bigger than what we banned. Abe, what about you?
Solitude, your days are numbered. We're coming for you. I have a lot of opinions about this ban. I think Up the Beanstalk, and to a lesser extent, Fury. I mean, I guess it's two pieces of the same thing. Up the Beanstalk is paying for the crimes of Evoke Elementals, and I guess something had to give there in terms of something having to go. I do not believe that. I don't know. I believe that if you're going to manage the modern format, that you need to either accept that there are going to be pitch elementals, and therefore the format needs to be balanced in ways that those things are balanced, or you need to completely reject them. They need to be admitted as mistakes.
I just want to agree with you right now, because I was trying to hold myself back, and I didn't know how you two would feel on this podcast. But Abe, go off.
I have been on this since the One Ring, effectively, of like, the thing is that the entire format was at this point of stability where you had to fight for incremental cards. Ren and 6 was the best way to gain any amount of card advantage, because you'd reliably get to a point you could cast your pitch elementals, or you could use cards like Omnath and pull away with the game, but you had to accrue a bunch of +1s, as opposed to like what Up the Beanstalk broke the rule of saying now all your things are zeros or you're going positive, and that's just way too powerful. Or like what all the One Ring decks do, which is inevitably use the One Ring a few times and then have drawn more cards than like your opponent will draw in the entire game. Those things, because of the pitch elementals, normally you could have some sort of counterplay to a card like the Ring of, I will put pressure on you until you die, right? Like, if you ever played the scam side of a scam versus One Ring matchup, or scam versus, I guess mostly One Ring matchup, Beanstalk matchup is different, but like the blue-black Murktide decks, for example, with the One Ring, those decks did not have a ton of ways to just turn cardboard in hand into board impact, so they were pretty beatable. The Beanstalk deck really took all of the limiters off that, and now you were just pitching everything that you could to cast spells to keep up with the fact that you were going to draw cards and spend your mana doing that. And now you can spend not mana, but cards, which you now had in abundance, to the point where you were decking yourself to interact with things. That is still going to be in play. You will still get interacted with for free. Your games will still feel non-functional, or like you did not have a chance, or you were paying taxes your opponent did not have to, because of these cards. And like, because of the fact that it is still going to be possible to just completely bury your opponent in cards by resolving a singular card, the format will continue to be something that is heavily warped around like the One Ring and early sources of card advantage. I don't think that this meaningfully solves the one toughness tax that the modern format has of Orcish Bowmasters and Ren and 6. I do not think this accomplishes what Wizards wanted it to, and it is very unfortunate, because I think that the modern format is just going to take a long time to recover from this being wrong, if it's wrong. I could be wrong about what I'm saying, and it could be that and also they could move really agilely and decide that maybe we're wrong about what the problems were.
No,
but all I see is that decks that are going to be problematic, that are going to have decks like Yawgmoth, like you were saying, Spencer, that are very good at establishing a lot of material in play, are going to be very difficult to answer without playing very specific strategies. I think it's going to make it so that decks like that will prey on a lot of the decks that were the premier aggressive decks in an era of having pitch elementals, and we're still going to have problems where your game's going to feel like non-games because of things like Solitude and Grief. As for Scam, I do think that Fury being gone means that you probably can't play red Grief deck anymore, and that's probably good, because the whole Grief package plus Fable and Ragavan, Like the black white deck is not on the same level of efficiency as that. I think that's like going to be something that people are going to discover. Is even if you try to do that, it's not the scam stuff that got you free wins as much as you thought it was. It was the fact your deck was a very, very good mid range deck that topped out at Fable the Mirror Breaker or like hardcasting Fury for value, and that was really good. And I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts about Modern. I can continue on the soapbox forever, but I'm gonna let Mason.
Can I go before Mason?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Only because Mason's like gonna steal all my talking points as he always does. No, just kidding.
You went before me. How'd I steal them?
No,
I
love it. I think that one of the things that I really love about what you said, Abe, is like the tax on things. I have talked to like a lot of people. They were like, if there was no Lord of the Rings in Modern, I would have played this format forever. Like, it was my favorite Modern format ever. Multiple people have said that to me. And it's hard, right? Because it's like, you want innovation in a format like Modern. Like, it can't be the same format forever. But I think that there is a real problem when you add Bowmasters to a format that already has Red and 6. Like that's bad. Like that's a problem. The other thing is that Modern. I don't even know that Modern was bad right now. Right? Like, I think that Scam was too good. And Scam was too much of the metagame. But, like, you could beat Scam if you wanted to. Like, it wasn't the worst Modern format that got bans. I don't know. I think that the what you said was right, but also there are lots of Modern formats that wouldn't have even had a ban.
Yeah, I mean, going by the old philosophy that they used to joke about of like ban till Jund is good, then ban Jund. It definitely feels like a ban Jund band, except also with Beanstalk being like way too broken. The fair decks have been too good because of pitch elementals for a while. They've been the only things that are really. It's like that. Like the Urza Saga decks compete with that, I think. But like all of the decks have such fair elements to them because they get to play pitch elementals. That it's kind of interesting.
I hate Grief. I think that they should have banned Grief. So like, you know, I said I would talk about it on the podcast and I haven't yet. So before I go to Mason, I think it's a mistake not to ban Grief. I think that anything that is enabling like limited cards that should not see play in Modern to see play in Modern, where like we have the pitch elementals and it's only available because of Grief, we should have just banned Grief. And I get that Fury hurts more decks than Grief, but I think that Grief hurts more games than Fury, if that makes sense. So, Mason, go ahead.
Yeah, lots been said. I guess I'll say what I would have thought of doing, since everyone else talked about it. I probably would have banned. I mean, it depends. Like, I see it sort of going two ways, and I also kind of like it is hard to differentiate what I know and what I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, there are a bunch of things I know, but I need to. Specifically, when I talk on like the podcast and stuff, I try very actively to not think about what I know. But so like 2 years ago when Modern Horizons 2 came out, they did a big BNR update right before Modern Horizons, about 6 months beforehand, and that's when they banned like Uro, Sanctuary, some Spirit Guide, some other stuff. I think that like we could have saw a lot of bans today, like more bans. I personally think that I would have banned like Grief, Ring, Bean. I don't really like banning Fury, but like I would if like, you know, I don't know. I would, depending on what my incentives and my goals were in the meeting. You know what I mean? And I just don't know what those were. It seems to me like this BNR was a lot of like, we've got some problems. like y'all have said, it's not even the worst diversity or like health format, whatever. The games just aren't very fun. We need to make the games fun, and the games being fun matters more than anything else, right? Competitive diversity can be really low, and the games are really fun. Who really cares, right? If Rock Paper Scissors is the most fun game ever, then it's the most fun game ever. Who really cares if there's no Blizzard Spock? You know, is my personal stance on things. So I think, kind of like Abe has said on the podcast a lot, I think he put it really well. The format being balanced around the pitch elementals is where we were. If we're going to do it, let's do it. If we're not going to do it, then let's not. I think it is really weird to have just Fury banned. And I think that Solitude is the force of will of Modern. And that has been sort of my stance for the last 2 years or so, is that, Solitude is better at stabilizing than Force of Will is in Legacy, but it is how you like safeguard stuff. It is sort of the floodgate, as it were, and kind of you have to like pass that barrier. And Fury, I think, was really good, and was nice that it could kill multiple things, but it was not like the only thing keeping stuff down. And I don't even think it like needs to go into as stronger cards as Ren and Six and Bowmaster. I think things like Lava Dart, I think other cheap interaction spells, I think the format getting stronger. Yawgmoth pushes down. People act like Yawgmoth is like the good guy and everything, and they're like, oh, Yawgmoth's over here making creature decks fun. And it's like, do you think Yawgmoth is like the fun guy when it comes to playing your X1s? Like, okay, Meddling Mage is a strong card. Meddling Mage would be good in Modern, but that's like the only card. Your human deck isn't good. It is not going to be good. Someone's going to 5-0 with it. Sure, it is very beatable. It hasn't scaled well. And the game has changed. So, like, when people tell me, like, oh, well, if they didn't ban Fury, I could play all these creature decks, it's like, would you? Would you play these creature decks? What are you going to be good against? And that's before we even get to Bowmasters and Ren and Six and Lava Dart. And, like, I could go on and on. But basically, I think the Ring is a mistake to not ban. I think they should have banned the Ring today. And I honestly can't believe that they didn't. And the only thing that makes sense to me is the holiday package. Unironically, that is my hardline stance. I think the Ring is a failure in game design. It is a failure in Magic, and I cannot believe it is still around. It is an unbelievable Magic card, and it blows my mind it is not banned. I honestly just can't believe that card's still legal.
Well, let's go into what we would start with. And I'm going to be honest, we're going to switch it up from the show notes because we're going to go Modern first. I am playing Tron at my only, I think it is literally my only Denver RCQ. It's a 1K plus at our former sponsor, GG Lehigh. I just think that, like, people will not be prepared enough for the Ring decks to be as good as they were. I think that the Ring decks are going to be better than they think that they will be. I'm playing Tron. Where are you starting in Modern, Abe?
Well, I mean, same as it ever was. No, I'm not gonna. Mason's pantomiming Hammer. I don't know. I think that. Yeah, I mean the One Ring is just now the best thing to do. The Up the Beanstalk decks that were pushing out the like reason to play One Ring 4-color decks or just One Ring Solitude decks in general, those are not around. That Flash in the Pan is done. But yeah, like I said, Mason, the One Ring is an absurd card. As much as I would love to play Hammer, I just do not think it's going to be reasonable to try to compete with decks playing and looping the One Ring, or using the One Ring plus Solitude to insulate themselves. I think that some form of One Ring Leyline Binding blue-white is probably where I would start if I had my one last Denver RCQ today, or something that's going to be well positioned against that, like you're saying, Spencer, playing like Tron to try to prey on those decks. But yeah, the One Ring is the best card in Modern, because Solitude is the actual best card in Modern, and so play those things together if you want to win. I do not think we went very far forward with these bans.
We did nothing, right? Like, that's how I feel.
Well, I think we tricked people. That's what I don't like about the banning. It's like we tricked people, and we're like, here are your toys, and their toys aren't actually fun. Like, I don't think, like, people are going to play these decks and they're just going to lose.
Where do you start, Mason?
I played Blue White Ring, just like Honor Arc Doss's Secret Lair winning deck that played like 2 up the Beanstalks. I don't need those Beanstalks, whatever. I play some interaction card, play Get Lost, play Preordain. Who cares? Smooth your draw out. Just play strong interactive cards and win. Play Red Insects in your Blue White deck and make your land drop. Sure, whatever. Who cares? Like, I think playing the ring, like the ring is clearly the card that goes over everything else in Modern. If you can interact and protect your one ring, you will succeed. And I think that is very, very good. I think there were other winners. Like, I think, Creativity got like a nice shot in the arm. I think Murktide got a nice shot in the arm. I think Hammer did. I think Yogg did. I think Rhinos did. But I don't think anyone got as much as Ring, because the Ring deck was like actually not that good versus Scam. Like, that's why I didn't play the Ring at that Apex 20K. Is because when I was playing my games, I realized, wow, this card is broken, but everyone's built their deck to beat me. I'm just going to play Expressive Iteration and Beans because Beans is actually unreal broken, and I'm going to be fine. And I felt great. I lost to things that like I chose not to like beat or whatever. That's fine. You lose. Who cares? We move on. But like the Bowmasters being in lower numbers and Shieldreds not being in the format is going to change things. Like I think God, I forgot his name. The Coffers deck might like probably needs to be restructured a little bit because 2 of its best matchups have changed. Like Scam is gone, but like I don't know. Like that shit really good. It's really good.
Oh, I do think that Coffers might be a big winner too. So I think that was a deck where it was good at playing by the rules of a Ring format by being able to play Ring and Bowmasters and Shieldred. And yeah, it played all these things in the same way that Tron did, but also having like a little bit more removal. I'm just not certain that that's going to matter as much anymore. I think people really, I don't know, especially the thing that scares me is that I felt like as a Scam player, I was pretty okay at beating the Ring blue-white decks that were just straight up blue-white decks with like counterspells and stuff. Because my spells were just cheap. I do not know that that's going to be the case anymore now that there's a deck that's going to effectively do that. And like, if you talk to anyone who plays like Murktide or any of the other Ragavan decks than Scam, that are supposed to be kind of in that operating that space of getting under decks like these, they will tell you they hate playing against the One Ring decks. It is just not a good matchup, and it is not like what they want to be doing. So I'm pretty fearful for that piece of Modern.
Our Patreon
I think I wanted to say something earlier. We kind of didn't get a chance to. Good. We talked about black-white Scam, Spencer. I think like there's probably something there, but I think it loses a lot of pressure, like Abe said. I think the truth somewhere lies between what you said, where Abe's like, I think it may be a little too inefficient, and you were like, I think it's going to be in the same place. Like, we're going to have a dominant deck. I think like Stoneforge, Solitude, Grief, Bowmasters interaction, that seems really good. Is that top of the meta good? I'm not sure. And losing the +1/+1 nature of the Undying effects and Ephemerate and Double Strike. I'm sorry, and the losing Double Strike, the +1/+1 counters, and gaining Ephemerate, which just lets you do your thing more and be grindier, I think is overall net good. But it is definitely something where, like, if I wasn't preparing for the RC and I was trying to do something totally new, I'd be like, okay, what does like those shell of cards mean together? So that's something I just really quickly want to say.
No, I totally think that's fair. And like, I think Ephemerate is just so different than what was happening in Red Black Scam that if that deck is good, we'll learn really fast what the differences are. From our Patreon, we got Daniel who says, "What is your stance on bannings? Are the complaints regarding Scam overdone? Might when might a banning happen in regards to the RC?" I mean, I put this in here because this happened, but I want to go first here. That I did not think that Pioneer was ready for a ban. I certainly didn't think it was ready for an unban. And I think that, like, Appraiser might have been necessary. Like, that could have been a thing that we needed to happen. But outside of that, like, the Karn ban was always, like, when they said it, I was like, okay, so, like, you want multiple green decks with these type of cards. But, like, and then you also want artifact decks to exist that, or decks that use a lot of artifacts or or game pieces to exist. I I I don't know that like Pioneer needed this, but I think that people will be happy after the RC happens that it did happen.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, kind of to echo a bit of that sentiment. I think that the Geomancer ban had to happen for Pioneer. I think the Up Beanstalk ban probably had to happen for Modern. I feel really good about the Karn ban for the longevity of Pioneer, and I don't feel that great about the Fury ban for like how long it makes a difference in Modern. But I think a big piece of that is that I think a lot of people very much misallocated what the problems with Modern are or were, and I think the scam deck is a product of just a multi-layered issue, like I was speaking to in the main portion of the show. I think people's complaints about scam they made sense to complain about because that's the deck that you're playing against the most, and it is the best deck. And it's frustrating to lose and playing games the games that suck really suck, where you just like don't get to do anything, you die to getting like scam griefed, are bad. But I did feel like, having played scam and played against scam a good bit, the games were still dynamic and fun in the way that like your best deck being a mid-range deck can be fun, where at least the way the games are ending are like happening through combat and stuff and resource advantages. They just have a chance to kind of start 3 steps ahead of you. And as far as the timing of it, personally, I was actually having this conversation with Jarvis right before he wound up winning his RCQ over the weekend, because he still wasn't qualified for Denver very late in the season. But he was talking about, maybe I'm going to have to use Atlanta as my opportunity to qualify. I think it's really fun, personally, to see the format shaken up this close to a large event, especially when like it's been a format like Pioneer, which has felt kind of stale for a long while to some people, and it's a good opportunity to see a format under pressure have problems solved. And I'm looking forward to that, and I think that it's unfortunate for people who were hoping to just be able to play their standby deck, and there's always going to be that amount of friction and loss. But I think in terms of what it does for the game and moving the format forward, I think that timing it towards the RC is a good thing. I think for people who want to start playing Pioneer casually, or like want to play at their LGS level who aren't RC players, it's a net positive for like a lot of people across the board. It lifts ships a lot to see those decks get a chance to even be highlighted, the new decks of a new dawn of an era of Pioneer where things have changed, for people to see those decks succeed and then get a chance to buy in and play those. So
yeah, I think I don't know. I echo a lot of what was said. One thing I wanted to say earlier that Spencer kind of hit on that I forgot, because kind of got going. We're trying to move through things here, but like, we are the only card game that does efficient, and I mean efficient, discard. Like, if you look at other card games, they've all decided it's unfun. Like, they don't do it basically at all, and there are exceptions that prove the rule. But they don't really allow for efficient targeted discard, and grief is that. So like, when I talked a little bit about like the banning being more about the for fun thing than like maybe even like overall health, like that's kind of what I mean. Like, to Spencer's point about grief, it's like super unfun for you to sit down and you're take a mulligan or whatever, because you're supposed to mulligan because your first hand wasn't very good. And I go, Luke, undie, take your 2 cards, you're dead. Like, I don't know. I'm glad they did a banning, and that's I wish they had like done that. I'm hopeful that the lack of pressure without Fury and the undying stuff will change it, and that the bean stuff removes it. But like Abe said, like, I think scam was a byproduct of like, you need to be brutally efficient where you cannot beat the One Ring and beans. But here we are, whatever. As for Pioneer, I'll say it. Abe, you probably agree with me. It sucks. We can't just pick up the green deck. I mean, Spencer too. All of us. We can't just pick up the green deck and win a tournament anymore. It sucked. I didn't change that deck for like a year and a half, and it won me like $5,000. Like, now I have to learn a new deck. That sucks. I just want to play the same deck forever and just win a bunch. So, besides that, though, I think overall the banning of Appraiser was probably overall net good. I think banning Karn is cool. I think that card probably needed to go. We didn't really mention it, but they said we're going to kind of have like a step towards curating the format more going forward. It seems to be not to the level that we had when we first had Pioneer, but definitely more than once every year. You know, they kind of basically even said that, like, hey, last time we changed this was in June 2022. We're not really happy with that. Going forward, expect more hands-on approach, excuse me. So I'm excited for that. I think that is a fine way to do things, just as long as you tell players, and they have. So now players know, like, hey, you buy into Pioneer, it might be a little more volatile. Now you know. So I think that's fine, and I'm really excited by it. And I'm excited to see what it shakes up. And, like, you know, hopefully I'll be testing with Abe for the Pro Tour. But if not, I'm really excited to see, like, what does the Murder at Karlov Manor mean if it's like there's no car, you know, and we get a whole new set. Like, what are all the cool things that are going to happen there? So I know, I'm excited. It's cool.
If you want to join the conversation, head on over to the Patreon Discord. That just means being on a Patreon of $5 or more. That's patreon.com/acmtg. You can join the public Discord for Heezy and Media over in the show notes. Whether you'll find it. YouTube comments are a great way to join the show. We've been having some really good ones lately, and honestly, like, YouTube is like kind of popping off for us. It's been really great, and we really appreciate it. But when you leave those comments, we, just as much as, like, just loving Abe as much as somebody has done that, or, whatever it is, it actually helps the show a ton. So do that. Then we are on X at CCMTG. We retweet people that are doing stuff. And also, like, man, the number of people that said that, like, we were their top podcast on their Spotify this year. Oh, let's go. That's gonna do it. Like, subscribe, review, comment. That's the best way to do it. Abe, what'd you learn this week?
This is not special learning, but something I was thinking about in regards to the conversation that was had about Smuggler's Copter and Thalia. And I think that that's going to be settled by kind of a debate where, is the strength of Convoke that it's resilient, or is the strength of Convoke its plan A? Because I think that, personally, I'm a believer in its plan A being the most important thing, and I think it's going to be a deck that is naturally built to be able to support Copter, but maybe not necessarily be the best fit for it. I think Thalia is better at making it so that your Convoke draws are as good as they can be, because setting your opponent a turn behind on answering the speed at which you deploy things is good. It's going to be interesting to see, like, kind of, that made me think about, like, the distinction that's going to happen between decks that are Copter decks that are aggressive and not, and what synergy is going to matter more. So that's what I learned and thought about this week.
I learned that Voice of Resurgence might be underrated. We didn't talk about that card for 1 single second. I think it could be a player. What about you, Mason?
I think the biggest thing that was take away was to think about maybe Farewell more, because clearly we heard, like, dissenting opinions today and, like, extremely polar camps. So there's probably, like most things in life, the truth is kind of in the middle. And I'm curious to know sort of what Farewell looks like in the metagame. Like, what am I supposed to be thinking about with that card? Is it like the truth? Is it bad? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? Because it is an incredibly punishing card.
That's going to do it for this week. Leave a comment, leave a like, let us know. Thank you so much. We got the Riz, we got the Biz, and we got the Hees. See you guys all next week with another episode of Constructed Criticism.